All right. Good day, everyone. And thank you for joining today's Ask Me Anything, where we answer your questions about cannabis legalization in New York. We do this every Wednesday at 4:20 p.m. New York City time. I'd like to welcome back those of you who have joined us for these events before. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I hope that you will make it a regular occurrence. My name is Jeffrey Hoffman, and I am an attorney in New York whose legal practice focuses entirely on cannabis. If you would like to contact me, you can do that either here on LinkedIn. I welcome all connection requests, or you can reach me at my email address, which you can see on the screen, for info at 420jurist.com, which I guess you might say makes me the 420 jurist. And as the 420 jurist, I will be answering your questions, roughly half of them from the list of questions I've gotten from previous AMA sessions, and roughly half from questions which you post in the comments here today. So if you'd like to ask a question, now is the time to do so. I always make a quick disclaimer before we get started, and that is that I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney, at least not yet. Though I notice that there are a few of my clients in the event today. So for you folks, don't worry, I am indeed still your attorney. But for the rest of you, I am not your attorney. And today's event is not legal advice. It does not create an attorney-client relationship. And of course, it is not a solicitation to offer legal advice. So, with that out of the way, let's get right to the questions. And we're going to start with a question that is very appropriate for today. And that question is for the conditional retail licenses. They mentioned having turnkey locations for those businesses, but is there any clarity on whether the businesses will have any say on where the locations will be? And the reason why this is a very prescient question is that it does appear that we are about to get started with the conditional adult use retail dispensary licenses. It does appear that at tomorrow's meeting of the Cannabis Control Board, they are going to approve the resolution to move forward. It does look like they are not going to make any substantial changes to the proposed regulation, which means despite the fact that he conceded way too prematurely, it does appear that Wei Hugh will win the bet I made with him about whether or not the Cannabis Control Board would be damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, or wait a minute, they're not going to ignore all those comments, are they? And it does appear they're going to ignore all of those comments. So we will find out for sure tomorrow. But once we get that definitive disposition, Way, if that is the case and you're listening, I do look forward to buying you your favorite cannabis product at the first adult use consumption lounge here in New York whenever those open. So congratulations, I think, to you. You had conceded prematurely in one of your posts, but I do think it looks like you are going to win the bet. So congratulations if that happens. Let's get back, or just real quick, let's just say some real quick things about what it looks like is going to happen next. In the outline for tomorrow's meeting with the Cannabis Control Board, they did present the putative application. It does appear that that application will go live no less than 14 days after it's been approved, and then the application will be open for no fewer than 30 days after it becomes live. So really big information there if you're interested in applying for the conditional adult use retail dispensary license for all of the justice involved individuals. It looks like that is going to be happening here pretty soon. So back to the question as it was asked. For the conditional retail licenses, they mentioned having turnkey locations for those businesses, but is there any clarity on whether the businesses will have any say on where the locations will be? So they will not have any say with specificity. You will not be able to choose your specific location. And if you do apply for that license, you will have to locate your business in one of the DASNY spaces that DASNY is creating, should DASNY choose to have you in one of those locations. When you do look at the putative application, which the Cannabis Control Board posted to tomorrow's meeting notice, there is a section where what you will do is you will rank your preference for a variety of geographic locations all over the state. There was some question as to what those geographic locations would be. And frankly, my specific question was, would they break the New York City area up into multiple different locations? And it does appear that they have indeed done just that. So that it looks like there are roughly 13 different geographic locations. That was a quick count on my part. Don't hold me to that. And if somebody is looking at the proposed application right now and wants to tell me it's a different number than 13, would love to hear that. But I do think the number is 13. So they are breaking New York City up into the 5 boroughs. So you could perhaps rank Manhattan first, Brooklyn second, Queens third, et cetera, et cetera. And then the normal upstate regions that we're all used to, capital region, et cetera, et cetera. So it basically looks like there are going to be 13 regions that the Cannabis Control Board breaks the state up into. You will be able to prioritize which region you want to be in. That does not mean you will get it. Basically, they're going to draw applications out of a hat, I think, although they may have some other type of priority mechanism that they use. And then they'll simply say, okay, you get first pick. And in your priority list, number 1 was Albany or the capital region, so you get it. And so you could imagine that process is going to continue through all of the individuals that apply. So the first several folks in priority or that get drawn out of the hat are obviously going to get their first choice. But then as you get down to, say, whoever gets number 137, there's not going to be a lot of spaces left. So those individuals will simply get what's left. It's possible that you would be in New York City and you're number 137 out of the hat. And that means all that's left is perhaps a site in Buffalo or maybe a site in the Catskills. And if you want the license, that is the location you're going to have to take. So that is the way the conditional licenses and the location of the DASNY spaces and where those businesses are going to have to be located is going to happen. All right, next question. Do you know timelines for when first retail licenses will be awarded and when OCM will choose security and store design vendors from the RFP process? So the answer for the first part of the question is very, very soon, because it does appear tomorrow at the Cannabis Control Board meetings, they are going to set the table to get cranking with the conditional adult use retail dispensary licenses. So if that is approved, it does look like the application will go up no sooner than 2 weeks from tomorrow. Could be longer than that, but no sooner than 2 weeks from tomorrow. They will then have the application open for a minimum of 30 days. There's no reason, just like we've seen with the conditional adult use, the conditional cultivation licenses, there's no reason that they couldn't start selecting those immediately, although I do think they will probably wait until they get a number of applications and review them all to try to decide when they're going to start actually handing out the licenses. But the key point is that the rubber is about to meet the road here, and we're going to start doing it. As far as the vendors that are going to work with DASNY via the RFP process, I believe Monday was the point when the RFP responses were due back in late June. Obviously, the DASNY is going to review all of those putative RFP responses, or I guess actual RFP responses. July 11th was another timeline that was scheduled in the meeting, in the RFP. And if one of you is looking at that right now, I don't remember off the top of my head, but that may be when they were going to start doing interviews or something of that nature. Again, I do not exactly remember the timing after the RFP responses were due. Although I do think now that we're about to start the application process for those licenses, the DASNY is going to start moving with alacrity, and it would not surprise me if they actually select that vendor here in the next month or two, if not sooner. But to get an exact answer on that, I would just encourage you go to DASNY's website or do a Google search, DASNY design build cannabis dispensaries. The RFP is going to come up there, and you'll get the exact timeline that at least they said in the RFP that they released, and that'll let you know their timing for selection there. All right, let's go to a few questions that we're getting. Actually, we're getting a number of questions over there in the comments. Let's answer a few of them. Do you have any insight or speculation as to when applications for registered organizations will reopen? So all I have at that point is speculation. As I like to say, I'm speculating on a hypothesis. Typically, what has happened in states that go through full-on adult use legalization is the medical program, what we're calling the ROs here in New York, becomes the stepchild, if you will, of the program, and really all the focus moves over to the adult use program. It does note in the law that eventually, whenever Tremaine Wright and the Cannabis Control Board decide that the ROs are going to be able to participate in the adult use market, it does say that they do have to continue being in the medical market. So what I think is going to happen is that the Cannabis Control Board is going to keep an eye on what is going on over in the medical market. You may recall over in New Jersey, there was a lot of concern about whether or not there would be enough product for the medical folks if the ROs were able to transition to adult use. Now, it's very clear from Tremaine Wright that the ROs are not going to be able to transition anytime soon. But just again, the point that I'm making is that there was some question about whether or not there would be enough product for the medical folks. So I do think that that is what the CCB is going to keep an eye on here. Are the ROs continuing to do their job as the adult use market rolls out? Are there any hiccups as far as supply being available for folks in the medical market? I do know that there are a lot of problems right now in the medical market. My good friend Nikki Lawley and a lot of the folks that are really looking in and being stewards of the medical market, or I guess we might say keeping the CCB honest as far as the medical market here in New York. There are a lot of problems. I know people are having difficulties with the registrations of their cards and the online systems breaking down and failing. So we really got to make sure, this is very important, that New York keeps its eye on the medical market. And if the current ROs are not meeting the needs of the participants in the medical market, I would encourage the CCB to reopen the application process so we get more ROs in the market that will meet the needs of all the folks that have medical licenses in the state. All right, next question. Any timeline or speculation on when patients and or designated caregivers will be able to grow at home? And yes, I have more than a timeline or speculation. We actually have some real data on that. And that is, in addition to the announcement for tomorrow's Cannabis Control Board meeting about the conditional adult use retail dispensary license, they have, unlike the conditional adult use retail dispensary license, they have created a revised proposed regulation for patients, designated caregivers, and home grow for medical cannabis. That means that revised regulation is going to get published in the state register and is going to have to go through the revised rulemaking period. Again, for those of you that are keeping score at home, that was the bet that I had with Wei Hugh about the conditional adult use retail dispensary license, that it also would go through that 45-day regulatory review period. It looks like that it will not. So again, Wei wins the bet, and I look very much forward to paying out that bet, because it means we will be doing it in a consumption lounge, and I can't wait for those to open, probably sometime next year, I hope. But since that new revised regulation has been proposed by the Cannabis Control Board, that means it gets published in the state register probably next week. We will then count 45 days from that, and then it will be able to go into effect. The Cannabis Control Board will recommend that the OCM implement that in a meeting, and then off we go. And those regulations for patients, designated caregivers, and home grow will come into effect. And I'm sure the folks in the medical world are very excited about that. and looks like we're going to get down to brass tacks on that front as well. All right, let's see if we got a few more questions here. Somebody says, you like my shirt. Glad you like it. I'll be wearing it a lot around the state because I am a living THC warning, as are most of the rest of you. All right. What does cannabis packaging look like moving forward? And it looks pretty draconian. So the Cannabis Control Board has released their proposed regulations for packaging. I would encourage you to go take a look at them. They are pretty draconian. You're not going to be able to say chronic or sticky buds, two of my favorite words in the human language, unless the proposed regulations get changed. You're not going to be able to have pretty colors and nice fonts and all kinds of other great stuff on the packaging. So I'm not super excited about that. I hope they change it. As I think those of you who may have read my LinkedIn post the other day, I think the packaging and advertising regulations related to cannabis should be no more strict than the ones related to alcohol. The state has the same goal in preventing folks that are under 21 from getting their hands on those products. So, if you're going to have these draconian measures around cannabis, I want to see them around alcohol. Let's have child-proof packaging be a requirement for alcohol in the state of New York, right? Let's not have, swimsuit models and Clydesdale horses promoting alcohol in the state of New York if we're not going to have those types of fun things allowed for cannabis. Again, that's just my opinion, but that's what I would like to see. So that's what cannabis packaging looks like. If folks like you, Mr. Joseph, don't make a lot of comments and the Cannabis Control Board doesn't make any changes, it's going to be pretty draconian for the packaging and the advertising here in New York. All right, let's go back to a question from a previous session. Thank you for the clarification on possession amounts. And just a reminder on the possession amounts, it's 3 ounces of flour, 24 grams of concentrate, and that is so you can have both. There is, I'm sure, going to be a higher threshold for the cannabis that you can have in your home based on what you grow. Probably when they release the home grow rules for adult use cannabis here in New York, my guess is we've seen a number like 5 pounds thrown around. That's a pretty big number, although I do know, folks, that that's just a cozy weekend at the beach with them and their friends for cannabis. Lots of hard-hitting folks on that realm, but more power to them. So I do think you're going to see a higher threshold that you'll be able to have in your home. And again, particularly from the cannabis that you grow in your home, which will be allowed eventually here. And the question was, will those possession amounts be the same as the purchase amount? And that's a very good question. My guess is probably no, that you won't be able to buy 3 ounces of flour and 24 grams of concentrate in a single transaction at a dispensary here in New York. Those rules will certainly come out when we see the eventual full regulations for the dispensaries. It's a little surprising that we're not seeing something about that a little early. Although perhaps that means we will, and the reason for that is because we're about to start licensing the conditional dispensaries. But I do think there's still plenty of time for the CCB to release the full regs before the conditional dispensaries are going to open. Obviously, the conditional dispensaries are going to have to meet whatever rules the CCB releases related to any dispensaries, and I am sure one of those rules will be the amount that can be bought in any given day by any single person from dispensaries. So we don't know that yet, but I have no doubt whatsoever that is coming. All right, for a question today from Miss Smith. Labor peace agreements in New York for cultivation. What is it? All right, so a labor peace agreement is an agreement that any applicant for a cannabis license in the state of New York is going to have. Don't bother applying for your license if you do not have your labor peace agreement in place. You will be denied. So a labor peace agreement is exactly what it says. It's an agreement with a labor organization, a labor union here in New York. And the peace part of it means that the labor organization agrees not to picket your business or have people out on the streets or on the sidewalks making noise about unionizing your business. Again, that is the labor piece about it. The state has an interest in not having disruptions of businesses, or particularly here in New York City, disruptions on the sidewalk, which really negatively impact people getting about and doing what they need to do here in New York City. So your cannabis business must sign this labor peace agreement where the labor organization agrees not to implement any type of action like that in front of your business. Now, of course, these labor organizations, the unions, are going to want something from you in exchange for their agreeing not to do those things. And basically, what they are going to want to be able to do is unionize your employees. That is just the way it's going to work here in New York. The language of labor peace agreements, and I've gotten them for a number of my clients at this point. The gist of it is going to be that the labor union is going to require you to agree to allow them that you give them a list of your employees, that you allow them to contact your employees, that you allow them to arrange to come on site at your facility and talk to your employees about the union and encourage those employees to join a union or to unionize. And you, as the employer, will not be able to badmouth the union to your employees or talk negatively about unionization or what the union is attempting to do. That is going to be the pound of flesh that the unions are going to require from you in order to sign a labor peace agreement. And you must have a labor peace agreement in place in order to do this. Now, I know a lot of people are going to have various opinions about this. I, for one, am frankly very much in favor of this. I am a believer in what a lot of the unions do for our low-level employees, and in the cannabis industry, that's going to be your bud trimmers at cultivators, your lower-level gardeners, your bud tenders at dispensaries, and we've already seen significant unionization efforts in the ROs. And frankly, I do think this is important. These are individuals that are not going to be able to effectively negotiate with their employers for most things. And so I do think it's reasonable that they are able to collectively bargain for this. I do think that generally the unions are going to, here in New York, are going to do a good job of working with cannabis businesses so that while they are indeed looking out for the issues that their union members are interested in, that they are not going to be so disruptive or so draconian or so negative that they really disrupt the cannabis businesses in any way. Much like I think the state of New York needs to make a partner of those in the legacy cannabis industry here in New York. They need to make them a partner and not a competitor. I would encourage all of my clients, and frankly, anyone that's going to try to get a license here in New York, a cannabis license. You are going to have to get this labor peace agreement. Frankly, if you're going to have a lot of employees, you are going to the unions are going to attempt to unionize your employees, and they will likely succeed. So I would encourage you to make the labor unions a partner and not a competitor. I get competitor is probably the wrong word, but make the labor unions a partner. Work with them. Do very positive things with them so that you can work together, so that they are not disruptive to your business. If we're all working together, we can have a very successful cannabis industry here in New York. And I just think that's wonderful, and that's the way we want to go. All right, let's go back to another question from a previous session. The question was, what are the best licenses for micro businesses? And I'm hoping that was a loaded question, although perhaps the individual was not entirely familiar with the licensing process that we're going to have in the state. The best licenses or the best license for micro businesses is the micro business license. Now, that does mean that at the very least, as a micro business, you're going to have to do cannabis cultivation. You could simply just stop there and then sell your cannabis to a processor. But if you're going to want to do other downstream activities from cultivation, let's say you're going to want to process cannabis or you're going to want to sell cannabis at retail, which a micro business licensee can do. It is the only licensee other than the ROs that are going to be able to be fully vertically integrated. But if you are going to want to process, if you are going to want to do retail as a micro business, you are going to have to grow that cannabis. So think about that. If you're interested in being a micro business, again, I do think, and without being flippant, the best license for the micro businesses is the micro business license. But again, that does mean you're going to have to at least grow if you're going to want to do any of the other downstream activities. So think about that. And if growing is not for you, then you're going to want to think very carefully about which other activity you are most interested in, and then get a license specific to that activity. All right. Got about 4 minutes left here. So let's do one more question or one or two maybe from the questions that are getting asked in the comments today. Are cannabis consulting companies that offer services allowed to be trademarked in NYC? So not only are you allowed to be trademarked in NYC, and not only are you allowed to be trademarked in NY, you can get a federal trademark. So this is the big issue related to trademarks generally, related to cannabis businesses, either plant touching or non-plant touching. If you are a plant touching cannabis business, you are not able to get a federal trademark because, as we all know, cannabis is still illegal federally, and generally the USPTO will only issue a trademark to a business whose activities are able to be carried out across states and across state lines. Even if you don't actually do it, they will not give you a trademark unless the activity can be done across states. And as you know, if you're a cannabis touching business in New York, your business activities are limited entirely to the state of New York. And for that reason, at least at this time, if you apply for a trademark for your plant touching cannabis business with the USPTO for a federal trademark, you will be denied. Now, as far as a state trademark, and there are no city trademarks, so if you are interested in New York City, that would be a New York trademark. And all states do have the ability for you to file for a trademark within that state. Again, your protection would only be in that state. So cannabis plant touching businesses absolutely can file for trademarks within the state of New York, and I would encourage all plant touching cannabis businesses to do so. Would certainly be happy to help any folks that want to do that, but you can certainly find many good attorneys that will assist you with that. So do it if you're a plant touching business. If you're a non-plant touching business, as I like to call a cannabis adjacent business, I would encourage you to file for federal trademarks in addition to your state trademarks. I have a non-plant touching business. That is my law practice, and I have indeed filed for some trademarks that I'm just waiting for the USPTO to approve or deny. And you will probably be seeing more about those trademarks in the future should I get them. All right. Let's do one more question. All right. And that question is going to be, can you be on a New York State liquor license and have a cannabis license using a separate building and legal entity? And the answer to that is yes. It does appear that you can be a liquor licensee and a cannabis licensee. You simply can't have those in the same facility or within the same entity that has the license. So it's very clear from MRTA. They have made it clear that both cannabis businesses can't sell alcohol. And then there's another section further down in the text, way further down, in fact, where they say specifically that alcohol businesses can't sell cannabis. It's interesting that they actually didn't make it entirely clear in the consumption lounge part of MRTA that the consumption lounges can't sell alcohol, but that is made very clear, like I said later on, that alcohol licensees can't sell cannabis. So by, if you just follow from one step to the other, if in order to sell alcohol in a consumption lounge, if that was possible, you would have to have an alcohol license. But then since it says later in MRTA that alcohol licensees can't sell cannabis, That means, I guess it's the transitive property. Those of you that are great mathematicians can correct me if I'm wrong. But just it is very clear that none of the retail businesses in the cannabis industry here in New York will be able to sell alcohol. So you can't do it in the same physical space or under the same entity. But yes, if you are a alcohol licensee and have that license and in one location, you could go get, or at least it does appear now. Cannabis Control Board may change this later in regulation, but it does appear, at least right now, that you would be able to get a license and have your cannabis business in a separate entity and a separate store other from where your alcohol business is. All right, I think that completes our session for today. I and imagine a lot of the other people that joined today have a lot of work to do now that it looks like the conditional adult use retail dispensary license is upon us. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today. As you know, we do these sessions every Wednesday at 4:20, so I would absolutely welcome you to join us again next Wednesday. If you're not currently a connection of mine on LinkedIn, by all means, send me a connection request. Happy to connect to you. And as I say at the end of our sessions every week, I know we're all super excited about legalization. I don't think there's anyone in the state or in the world, frankly, that's more excited about it than me. But the most important thing that we're doing here in the state of New York is we're expunging all of the low-level cannabis offenses or convictions. If you're convicted of a higher level cannabis offense, we can work on doing 440 expungement with you. And these justice issues are just incredibly important. And you're going to be hearing more from me about these issues in the coming weeks and months. So with that, thank you for attending. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. And we'll see you next week. Have a good one.